morning, everybody. Crappy Mondays, and welcome to the News Agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the most political correspondent, Dave Burke. Morning, Dave.
Good morning. How are you?
Have you got over all your multiple political conferences flu?
Yeah, it's that traditional time of year.
Yeah. Political journalists are never very well in October, it's got to be said.
No.
So this is the People's Pay-Per-View. Get into the comments, ask us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them for you. Those of you listening late morning, Matt, those of you listening later on podcast will just have to do like the government does and pretend everything is fine while you plummet into a moral abyss instead. So what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on further tributes to World Cup legend Bobby Charlton, who died a few days ago, this time from his brother Tommy. There's more stuff inside the paper. But there's also news of a different sort. And today I want to take us first to page 11, where I've got a story in. Hooray! It does happen occasionally. Now, this is about the continuing nuked blood scandal, in which there is a mounting pile of evidence that successive British governments have covered up the results of blood tests that were taken from servicemen during nuclear weapons testing in the Cold War. Now, if such blood tests exist, they would provide irrefutable proof of whether these men were knowingly irradiated or not, and it could explain any subsequent damage to their health. Now, the Atomic Weapons Establishment, which is part of the MOD, has admitted it may have nearly 5,000 such records, but says it's too expensive to look for them. Now, there is a cost limit that is set as part of FOI requests. So that was their explanation as to why, when I asked them in an FOI how many records they had, they kept giving me different answers. I would, of course, go and look through their archives for free. And that would cost them nothing at all, apart from, the truth. Now, Dave, you're a political journalist. We make FOIs all the time, don't we? How common would you say it is for a government department to tell us that it's just too expensive to tell the truth?
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time for myself and my colleagues. It's one of those frustrating things where we kind of make the assumption that everything would be stored in a easily presentable way. And I think the issue is the appeals process takes so long. A lot of the time we're told that it takes a long time to extract. So what a lot of the time we think are quite straightforward requests, certainly as is the case in this instance.
Yeah.
It's a massive source of frustration. I mean, certainly I'd say a good, more than half of the requests I put in end up going this way, where we're told that, it can't be done within the time frame and within the costs.
Yeah. But that's one of the get-outs in the Act, isn't it, really? To have a cost limit, because you could ask for something that would cost £1 million to find the answer to, and I could understand that you might need to have a cost limit. But they've set it for the AWE at 450 quid. So anything that costs more than 450 quid, which is like 2 days' work for one person, roughly speaking, I think, in their calculations, is just you're never going to get the answer to. And anything that is a big cover-up, or even a small cover-up, by definition, is going to take more than a day to dig it out, one would have thought. And of course, things get a lot more expensive if you do lie about things. Now, what do you think, everybody? Do you think, have you been following the nuke blood scandal? Are you interested in this? Are you a nuclear veteran, member of the community or not? Do you think it's something that we should now be telling the truth about? Because these guys have said for 70 years that they were guinea pigs and they were knowingly irradiated by the government, subject to human experiments, basically. And the governments, successive governments of every party, have said, no. Nothing like that. If you've got anything like that, do show us the evidence that you were irradiated. And of course, if they've got blood tests, that's the evidence, and they've had it all along. But this all started in 2018 when I found the very first document about blood tests taking place. One of our MP supporters asked a question in Parliament about where these blood tests were now being kept. And the answer, and I'm going to say it to you as fully as I can, is the MOD is unable to locate any information that suggests staff took blood samples for radiological monitoring at the tests. Service personnel who were present may have had blood samples taken during their career, but these individual military medical records are not held centrally. Of course, if they do have 5,000 blood tests at the Atomic Weapons Establishment, then they are held centrally, and they are certainly able to locate some information about it, one would have thought. In the 5 years since that question, the MOD and AW have repeatedly denied having any knowledge. Now, Claudia says, I think we're talking about Jacob Rees-Mogg there. I think that's a different topic. in the 5 years since we've asked that first question, the MOD has repeatedly denied having any knowledge about this until last year. And we found a memo between atomic weapons scientists written in 1958, I think, which was discussing the gross irregularities in the blood of a squadron leader called Tory, who flew through the mushroom clouds on sampling missions. Now, after this, Dave, they admitted they had a small number of blood tests. So I said, naturally, well, what's a small number, lads? Are we talking 6 or 60 or 600? And they said, we've got one. I said, right. And they said, we've got one blood test from one serviceman. And I said, well, here's the Tory memo. That's 7 blood tests from one serviceman. So how many have you got again? And then they said, oh, no, we haven't got any. So I had to complain to the Information Commissioner. And after a bit of a wrangle over months, they forced the AWE to give some explanation as to why they weren't able to search, which is how we now have this development. The AWE said it may have 4,711 individual records about individual people, and it would have to search each and every one of them to see if there was any blood tests inside, and checking it would just cost too much. Now, the question here is, Dave, if I've got this wrong, right, and the MOD has absolutely nothing, and they generally have nothing, why have they issued so many different denials? They've written to MPs saying blood tests were never taken. They intended they never actually took place. They've said to Parliament that health records are held at the AWE. Then they've said that they aren't. Why have they issued so many different denials to different people? Because if they have the truth at their fingertips, one would have thought they would just be consistent. They seem to be all over the shop, which is giving me, of course, loads of fun. But it's not really how to look honest, is it?
No, I mean, it seems absolutely astonishing that there's no sort of proactive attempt by the government to just get to the bottom of what's happening, to reveal what they've got. You know, the fact that it's taken so much tenacity from yourself and the number of freedom of information requests and the barriers that are put in your way seems absolutely appalling when you've got people that are experiencing the real life consequences of these actions that happened so many years ago. So, yeah, I mean, it's, they realised that certainly the cost of holding their hands up and saying, look, we've done wrong would be absolutely eye-watering. But by doing so, they're standing in the way of people getting justice, getting the answers they need.
And it wouldn't hurt the current government, really, to open up those files and be honest, because whoever did this or covered it up or took those tests, it was many years ago. Plainly, we can't blame Rishi Sunak for it. We can only blame him for not being honest about it today, him and Grant Shapps. But that seems to be what's happening. And they won't meet the campaigners and they won't talk to them about it and they won't look at the evidence. So there's a lot of, hear no evil, see no evil about it, rather than actually, like you say, dealing with the fact there is an issue. It's completely historic, but let's turn the rock over and see what's underneath. What do you think, everybody? Is that something that you would fancy that your government should be doing? It is going to be an expensive process. It's not going to be cheap to start looking through this stuff and perhaps paying compensation. But it does seem to be one of those things where it's going to have to happen one day. And the longer it takes, the more expensive it will be. Now, Alan says, do you think a change of government will finally get an apology and some compensation? And we did have at the Labour conference, Angela Rayner, the deputy Labour leader, who said she's going to do all she can in government to deliver on compensation, the full medical records, a public inquiry, and a Hillsborough law, which will sort of prevent further future cover-ups. Whether we get that or not, of course, we have to wait and see, but they are at least promising it, which is far more than the other side are. Now, politicians do row back on promises. It happens. But, I mean, when you're talking to these guys in Parliament, Dave, do you get the impression that Labour are saying what it takes to get elected, or are they saying what they are going to try to do, generally speaking?
I think thus far there's been, and certainly it was evident at the conference, there's a reluctance to make any pie in the sky promises that they know they can't deliver on. I mean, certainly anything that involves spending money, we've seen that they've held back from things that you'd think would be the bread and butter. The two-child benefit cap, for example, is one of the things you would expect a Labour government to do, but they're making the argument that until they get into power and know the state of the nation's finances, they're not doing it. So, I mean, I think they're wary of over-promising. I think we've seen there's been lessons learned from Boris Johnson, who came to office with all kinds of fanfare about what he was going to deliver. You look back over the Brexit promises, over levelling up, all these kind of things, and weren't delivered on. And I think Keir Starmer in his team were very wary of repeating that. So I think we're seeing a lot of caution from Labour HQ at the moment, and I think that's likely to continue until very close before the election.
Yeah. I mean, Angela Rayner did sort of, careful with her words slightly. She said she was going to try and do her best and everything else. But I suspect in this sort of promise desert that we're currently in with the Labour Party, for there to be something of a promise makes it a bit of a rock within that desert. Whether it's a rock we continue noticing later on, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they've said this is something they want to work towards is definitely a positive move, and you'd hope that there'd be a commitment there to make towards that, although they've not made any cast iron promises on, sort of the financial side, etc. This is a great step forward that Labour government is committed to looking at it and trying to deal with it.
Yeah, we did, and we didn't have this when Labour were in opposition before. Pre-97, the Labour Party was supportive, generally speaking, of compensation, but they didn't really make any specific pledges in manifestos and things like that. And the sort of current version of the Labour Party in the past few years has been doing that. So we'll have to see how it all pans out a little bit. And it does turn out, of course, to be more expensive in the long run not to do all this, because what happens, Dave, is whenever you have an FOI and they say it's too expensive, I'm not going to do it, the people involved, the people that are affected, will then just have waves of requests. There's more. I get worse, right? If the AWE and the MOD hates me, and I've seen your emails, lads, I know you do. If they hate me, I just get worse if they don't tell me the truth. I come again, and I come again, and I come again. It leads to waves of data protection requests from veterans and so on, questions in Parliament, letters, manpower, Information Commissioner appeals, press officers ringing them up asking what the hell's going on, and now, of course, the veterans have launched a court case, or they're trying to raise money for a court case, which dragged the whole issue to the High Court, which, if it gets there, is going to be more than 450 quid, I think you'll find, Mr. Atomic Weapons Establishment. This is almost a stupid question, Dave, but do you think this government or any future government will ever realise that it's cheaper to tell the truth at the beginning?
Well, no, I mean, I think at this stage, I mean, it feels very late in the day for the government to hold its hands up, knowing that this is a process that's going to last for some years anyway, with the public inquiry and everything. It's, they've got the opportunity. They could be the government that finally says, after 70 years of people needing answers, you'd think it would be an easy win. But, we've thought that for some years, and there's not been any, any movement by the government. I can't see the current government changing their position on this. No.
Well, maybe they'll realise eventually that it's going to be very expensive for the next government. And at some point, they'll decide that they can get the win of looking good and then get the double win of giving Labour a massive headache. And they'll order the public inquiry. And I can go, hooray for Rishi Sunak. And that would be an even bigger win. If you think, by the way, that all this stuff does need to get to court and does need exposing, there is a crowdfunder trying to raise some money for the case. Just Google Bloody Truth and nuclear veterans and you will get to the crowdfunder on the Crowd Justice page, and you can donate, chuck a tenner in if you can. Alternatively, you can go to labrats.international, the campaign group. They have a shop where they're selling T-shirts. Get the merch for the Bloody Truth. My boobs, sadly, are not in the shot. So you can get the merch, and every sale, the profits go towards the crowdfunder. So you can advertise the case to other people, explain it to them when they say, what the hell's your T-shirt about, and donate to the case at the same time while getting a lovely T-shirt for yourself and your loved ones. So go and have a look if you can, labrats.international. Now, we need to move on a bit because there are some other stories in the paper, apparently, other than mine. It won't have escaped your notice that the Conservative Party's death spirals are getting sort of tighter and tighter in their revolutions. They lost 2 by-elections last week, not just to a protest vote, but to the opposition, which is almost unheard of in historical terms. Rishi Sunak's phone number was found online. Somebody rang him up to prank him and recorded his voicemail message. Thankfully, he didn't answer it. But when that was Boris, I remember a massive scandal about it. And Liz Truss is some kind of festering zit that still won't be popped and is going to be popping up before long to issue her own shadow budget, which is astonishing. Now we learn in today's paper from our colleague Mikey Smith that Jacob Rees-Mogg, a man who was then efficiency minister, what a job. He suggested that civil servants' resignation pay should be cut by 25% if they got, sorry, I think it might be redundancy pay even, that their payout should be cut if they get axed. But he himself pocketed a massive lump sum when he was fired. Dave, take us through this. What happened, when, and why?
Yeah, so this is a long-standing convention whereby if people lose their jobs, if ministers lose their jobs in the cabinets, the convention is that they'll get 3-month continuance pay. I think the thinking behind it is a lot of the time, if there's a minister that's in place and there's a change of government, a lot of the time these are factors beyond their control. If there's a change of leader, if there's there's a change around due to anything sort of not related to performance. I think the idea is that you can.
If there's a change of leaders because they perform badly. And sorry, go on. I'm interrupting.
I mean, this has been in place for some time. Certainly, it was in place under previous Labour governments as well. The idea being that it lets people plan financially, but as you rightly say, there's there's questions over whether this is whether this should be the case. Whether it's right that people get these continuous pays on high salary jobs that they're no longer performing. That's certainly the argument for it. But certainly in this case, it raises some eyebrows, particularly in relation to Jacob Rees-Mogg's previous comments on recommendations on cutting civil service redundancy pay. I mean, it seems absolutely staggering, as Labour have pointed out in this article, that you can take such a strong line position on this and yet still accept a payment like this when they've only been when it had only been in post, in this case as business secretary under the Liz Truss government for 7 weeks.
Exactly. So, you're in a job for 7 weeks. Now, if you or I was sacked after 7 weeks, Dave, regardless of whether we had cocked up or the editor had cocked up and we would have got cleared out afterwards, would we get 17 grand?
I mean, no. I'm going to go with no on that one.
It would be a no. Nobody gets 17 grand after 7 weeks, because you don't have any employment rights after 7 weeks. You have to be in post like for a year or two, don't you, to start qualifying for redundancy payouts. I can appreciate perhaps if you're not earning very much money, yeah, of course, 3 months redundancy does seem reasonable. But he wanted to cut civil servants redundancy from 4 weeks to 3. So he's a multi-millionaire, and he's already on 120 grand a year as a cabinet minister. Why do you need an extra 17?
I mean, it's particularly been an issue in recent years with high turnover of cabinet members. We've seen sort of reshuffle after reshuffle after reshuffle, change of 5 Tory leaders, since 2015. Where this is happening more and more, and people are getting these payments after very short terms, and in many cases, as happened with the ministers that left when Boris Johnson left Downing Street, a lot of these people then go on to be rehired again, moved back into the cabinet again after in Liz Truss's instance, after a few weeks. It was recent months have shown up just how many questions there are around this, whether this is the right system.
Yeah, sorry, Dave. It happens when they resign as well as being fired. It just if it's your choice kind of thing. And Liz took her own payment as well, didn't she, when she lost her job as Prime Minister?
Yes, she did.
These people. And what do you think, everybody? I mean, obviously, I know what we all think, right? It's disgusting. But what would you do to replace it? Does it seem like there should be some kind of redundancy payment? It is a job. They are getting made redundant. Maybe it's not necessarily their fault. What do you think should happen? I don't believe I just said that to anyone in the cabinet when they lose their position. Rachel says, Jacob Rees-Mogg was fighting for Brexit, then moved his business to Ireland. The pinnacle of hypocrisy. I would suggest that axing civil servants redundancy payment while taking your own very generous payment is hypocritical as well, actually, hypocritical enough. Now, I could remember a little while ago, Dave, I think it was roughly a year, actually, it may even be coming up to anniversary before long, that a Prime Minister of this parish promised a government of integrity, professionalism and accountability. When are we going to get it? Do you know? Have you heard anything on the grapevine?
Well, it's certainly been a rocky year, hasn't it, on all kinds of things. I mean, you look at the number of cabinet members that have left through various reasons under a cloud. We've seen question marks over Rishi Sunak's own actions. We just have to look back to the sort of failure to declare his wife's interest in the childcare firm. I mean, yeah, it's we're still waiting on that one.
Yes, unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be likely to turn up anytime soon. Of course, if Sunak is watching, and if you want a way to perhaps to try and claw back some accountability or some integrity and some professionalism, then maybe sort of acting in that way would actually help you in the polls a little bit in the run up to the next election. You certainly couldn't do much worse, but maybe trying a bit of integrity, professionalism, and accountability would move you along a little bit in people's estimation. Who knows? You could start with opening up the atomic weapons establishment files. To me, if necessary, like I said, I would search them for free. In fact, I'd charge the Mirror to do it. So, everyone's a winner. Now, get into the questions, everybody. What do you think? Do you think that there's a lot of stuff that's been going on recently, polls and so on, about general elections, that most people do not want to wait another year for a full general election? Rishi Sunak's got until January 2025 before he has to call one. We heard over the weekend that Labour is planning for a May 2024 general election, which of course would mean that Sunak has to go maybe about 9 months early. Do you think that's likely? Do you think that's what you want? We did hear that Labour government are going to sort of be seeking access to civil service in the new year, which is the sort of the heralding, if you like, of where you think a general election is going to be, because the opposition has to start talking to civil servants about how it would enforce and carry out some of its plans. But what do you think? Are you prepared to wait until January 2025 for your vote? Do you want to go sooner? Do you want to go right now? Do you want to go last week? Are you happy to go in May 2024? Do you think that Rishi's going to hold out a bit longer? When we were at Labour conference, this show was told by Tom Watson. He thinks he's going to hold out to the very end because he's got no reason to go anytime sooner. Unless, of course, California starts looking a little bit more favourable than it does now. Now, it's not like Mogg needs the money. He is a multi-millionaire, and we do need the money, apparently. And they keep telling us there isn't any money to spend on us. And we are due an autumn statement soon, aren't we, Dave, in the next few weeks, where the Chancellor is probably going to announce some kind of spending cuts. He's certainly under pressure to announce some tax cuts or something. Can he politically get away with that, Dave? And how bad do we think those cuts are going to be?
Well, he kind of finds himself in a difficult position now because the autumn statement is likely to sort of be the last one, or certainly sort of it will set the tone for the general election. So there's massive cries within the Tory party. I think over the course of the Tory conference, over and over and over again, we saw backbenchers and pressure groups saying that there needs to be tax cuts built in. We're seeing sort of higher tax levels than you would expect from a Conservative government, and this is causing a lot of unease. So yeah, there'll be pressure on Jeremy Hunt to try and deliver this, and like you say, this doesn't come unless you're Liz Truss. You do need to try and balance the book in some other way. And he's been talking. He's changed the tone recently and talking about waste within the public sector. I think we can expect there to be sort of targets for reductions on budgets there, reductions on personnel within civil service departments. So yeah, I mean the details yet to come out, but I think we can certainly expect there to be expectation that the ministers will reduce spending within their own departments by significant amounts in order to try and keep the kind of right wing of the party at bay.
Yeah, I would be amazed if there weren't an announcement of tax cuts about 5 years' time. Right, so the thing they do, they always tend to say, like, "Oh, we're doing very well now. We predict we'll be at a budget surplus at this random point in the future if nothing else happens, and so we will definitely introduce tax cuts then."
Well,
exactly. In the meantime, they have lost power, so it's completely irrelevant, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great opportunity for Jeremy Hunt to set traps for the next government.
Yeah,
which you would expect there to be an element of that happening. Things that they know in likelihood they're not going to be expected to deliver themselves. So I think this is going to be a massively important budget that we can expect to see coming out, because then it would put the pressure on Labour to undo some of these measures, or to sort of bring in to sort of commit to spending more on public services, which would be a tough call to make in the first sort of year of a new government.
Exactly, but imagine setting a budget just to upset the opposition as opposed to actually be financially responsible. And we were hearing there's been some rumours that Jeremy Hunt might even stand down before the next election, but I don't know how true they are. Steve says, I think the Tories will hang on as long as possible in the hope of a miracle that makes them look competent. I'm not sure even God is capable of that one, Steve. But we'll have to wait and see, won't we? Of course, if they did open up the atomic weapons establishment files, I'd say they suddenly started looking competent. Not that I would probably help them get elected very much, whatever I had to say, but there we are. Now, thank you for that, Dave. Thank you for taking us through it. Now, we have found some good news. There is some in the world, and here it is. Now, speaking of moggies, this show is unapologetically pro-dog, always has been, always will be. And now research from the University of Copenhagen may have the answer as to why so many people agree with us. According to a study, dog owners love their animals much more than cat owners do. They spend more on vets bills, they are more likely to insure them, and they have higher attachment scores, while the cats get less spent on them and are generally considered, once they get ill, to be a bit less worth a big vet's bill to save them. Dave, do you think this is proof that the reason cats don't like us is because we don't like them? Very much. Maybe if everyone was a bit more honest about that, and so many other things as well, we'd all be the happier for it.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, as a dog lover myself, I spent a bit of Saturday at the vet because my dog had an eye infection. I think you're absolutely right. I think you tend to be. I think because dogs are more attached to you. I think because they tend to cuddle up to you a lot more, because they'll sit with you. They'll be around you a lot more. Whereas cats can be a lot more remote, and they'll happily go and sort of roam the neighbourhood. There's possibly an argument that you notice these things a lot more. Sort of a cat with a bad eye, you might be some more time. But yeah, I mean, dog owners are at the vets all the time over what could be slightly small ailment.
Maybe this is the sign of the proof that actually dogs are more evil and manipulative, because they've evolved over time to the big puppy dog eyes and therefore are getting the money spent on them. Whereas cats are just like, you idiot, what are you doing? You're just demeaning yourself. And aren't there. Like, cats are busy being evil geniuses. Yet they may not get the same spent on them, but they do go out and commit murder on a regular basis. So, dogs generally don't do that quite as often, although the Mirror does tend to report on it when they do. Okay, thanks for that, Dave. I think perhaps, I've always thought that dog owners, there's dog people and there's cat people in the world, and never the two shall meet. Dog people are open and giving with love and affection and happy to receive it, whereas cat owners feel they should be abused, and that's where they are. And that's just, they're never going to get on at all. But we would all have dogs if only we would be a bit more honest with the fact that we don't like cats and cats don't like us at all. And now perhaps we know why. Anyway, thank you for taking us through this, Dave. Well done for getting your dog's eye infection sorted out. Of course, you wouldn't have bothered if it was a cat. Or if it was Jacob Rees-Mogg, he could sort himself out, couldn't he? If you're listening on podcast, please leave us a review so other people can find us. We will be back again on Wednesday for another edition of the News Agenda Explained. Till then, everybody, keep safe. Watch out for spending cuts and tatty bye. We'll see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.